Okay, Mike, we're back. What's on the agenda today?
Risteard, good to see you again. So today we're here to talk about the Masters Program. I suppose first and foremost, what is the Masters Program and why did we set it up? We're going to talk more about the process involved in the Masters Program. So the kind of assessment that we begin with, everyone who joins, we don't just throw them into the deep end and they join into the gym. So what does that first session, that first physiotherapy assessment look like? What does their beginner's foundation program look like? Again, this is our sort of beginner step into the gym. So even when you've had your first session, you don't just dive into the main program. So you have this sort of in-between period, this foundations program for all new members. We're here, we can cater for their kind of individual abilities and their ailments. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about, what's our philosophy, especially around exercise. Why is exercise medicine? Why is resistance training our secret weapon against aging? Why is it that we have members getting fitter and not frailer as they age? And, some of the nuts and bolts of the science behind this philosophy. So I always say it's exercise philosophy and it's exercise physiology. So that's what goes on with the Masters Program. We want to talk about what actually changes, again, some of the science, the nuts and bolts of strength, power, muscle mass, bone mineral density, maybe some of the evidence and the science behind that. Why is it so important and why is it, I suppose, somewhat unique that we're there at every class? We have a chartered physiotherapist at every single session, watching the members, coaching them, giving them feedback, progressing them, regressing them. Why is that a model that really works and why is it that our members really trust that and they really value that?
Brilliant. Yeah, I think one of the things that's I think we really want to try and get across is, what is the Masters Program, and, in one way, it's simple, but like in another way, it isn't, because there's so much detail there and it's not just an exercise class. It's not just an exercise program. It's something that we are hugely passionate about. We have a whole team working behind this to make this the best possible program and the best possible system for older adults to exercise and to improve their health. And I think it's going to be really exciting just to go through that in a way that people can fully understand all that goes into the Masters Program and what it is. And I think it's going to be really nice also to touch on the community aspect, because, we hear a lot that exercise is medicine, but community is medicine too. And we know how important it is for our overall health and our well-being. And I think that's often an unsung area. I think it's also going to be nice to touch on what happens kind of beyond the gym. So we've loads of events, we do education pieces, we have all sorts of different aspects outside of the gym that'll be nice to touch on and share, and I suppose talk about our vision of this idea of the Masters movement, trying to change the narrative of what it means to age in Ireland and how to do that healthily. And, it's a great time to be talking about this now, I think, because there is so much, I recently had a client telling me that he's here because, the BBC, there was a big piece on BBC News about the importance of strength training for older adults. So like it's becoming more and more mainstream and people are becoming more and more aware of it, that, it's a great time to be kind of having these discussions and having these chats now. And it's going to be exciting to talk about what's ahead and what's, what we see as our vision for, what the Masters Program can be going forward. And I suppose what the future is for aging healthily in Ireland. So Mike, yourself and Rory, you founded the Masters Program and I joined a little bit later. So tell me, why did you build the Masters Program?
Yeah, so the Masters Program started in June 2021. Probably more out of necessity than, some sort of grand plan or some idea for how healthy aging and training was going to go in the future. What we basically had was we had a lot of people who were in this age group, 55 plus, and they weren't following the plan. As a physiotherapist, they'd come into me with a sore knee or with a sore shoulder. I'd assess them. We're very much exercise-based or activity-based physios. I'd look at the rehab they had to do. I'd come up with a plan to maybe tackle this injured shoulder, this injured knee. They'd follow the plan and they'd get a bit stronger. And then the next step of their rehab might be to join a gym and maybe do higher resistance training or do tougher exercises, use some of the machines in the gym. Or sometimes I'd tell them to go home and buy a couple of kettlebells or a couple of weights. And this was kind of the time just post-COVID. It's pretty hard to get your hand on any kind of gym equipment at the time, but those who could, they'd buy a couple of bits. And then they come back to me and they'd say, "Oh, Mike, I tried my best, but I couldn't quite get it done. I went down to the local commercial gym. I went in the door and the music was too loud, or no one showed me around, or, I didn't feel safe in that environment. It didn't really suit me. I couldn't find the right machine to get to. or those who had the equipment at home would say, oh yeah, I have those dumbbells. They're lovely. Now they're in a corner. They're gathering dust at this stage. So I just wasn't able to get those exercises done. And then me as a physio, we're thinking, well, it's great that your shoulder's not sore. It's great that your knee's not sore, but we're not really getting you beyond this sort of hump of like, you're getting better, you're fine, you can last your everyday life. At the moment, you're not coming into me in pain, but we could get you functionally much better. We could get you stronger. We could get you able to do more and more. And also, I think the idea of being a bit more holistic, rather than just focusing on the knee or just focusing on the shoulder. Well, there's, their specific exercise, their specific problems. Why don't we get a general program to get everything better?
Mike, just to cut in there, I think, every physio knows what that feels like. We have that kind of model of one-on-one sessions that we do with our clients. And while it is, often very, very helpful and often great, it does leave us wanting for that longer term kind of behavior change. So I think it's such a good spot. And it's something that I know that every physio who works in musculoskeletal rehab will feel that and will know this. And it's, what do I do? And as you say, it's maybe I try and ask them to join the gym or show them how to do a few things, but oftentimes that might leave us wanting too.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost an accident that the Masters program started. So, week after week, I was having these people come back to me and they weren't following the plan, or they weren't able to get to that next step or that next level. And eventually I was blue in the face telling them to do it at home. And I said, well, why don't you come up here and do it with us? I had a chat with Rocky or Rory, as you said earlier. Had a chat with Rocky and I said, listen, I'm thinking about doing this class, getting these older adults in. And what do you think? Is that something you'd like to get involved in? Is there a way we can do it here in the gym? Straight away, Rocky loved it. And he'd seen it from the other side as well. He'd been coaching in Leinster Cricket Club. He had a lot of people who were playing tennis, playing cricket in this age group. And similarly enough, they were either getting injured or they maybe didn't quite trust him as the S&C and not as the physio, or they weren't sure what the right program is. So straight away he said, I'd love to be involved in that. I have loads of people who might like to do it. And then funny enough, when the two of us got started, we started telling people to come up, the phone started ringing. And someone would say, hey, Mike, I heard you're running that class. And I'd say, I am, yeah. What's the injury? And they'd say, I'm not injured, but I'd love to come down. I said, oh, no, sorry, you have to be injured. This is only for people doing their rehab. So at the start, it was very much a supervised rehab class. After the phone rang 3 or 4 times, myself and Rocky kind of said, well, what are we waiting for here? I think prevention is better than treatment. Why are we waiting for people to come into us with a sore knee or a sore shoulder? Why not take people who are fit and healthy and active, or maybe they're pain-free, but they're not quite as fit and healthy and active as they'd like to be, and develop a program from them. So it just grew from there. We'd kind of think we'd 6 or 7 people on that first month. We ran 2 classes a week on a Tuesday and a Thursday. And little by little, through word of mouth, through people finding us online, through people maybe coming through the physio clinic and having a look inside and saying, what's that going on in there? I'd love to be part of that. It took off, and, we're 5 years at it now, and we've gone from 2 classes a week up to 55 classes a week. I was the one physio here at the start. Myself, yourself, we've 3 others here now as well. And the 6 S&C coaches, we've classes from Monday to Saturday. We've Pilates on a Sunday. It's really gone from strength to strength over the first 5 or 6 years.
100%, Mike. And look, the thing you were touching on there that I just think is so powerful as well is the idea of treatment versus prevention. And we know how good the healthcare system, for all its for I suppose all its shortcomings, that the healthcare system is quite good at diagnosing and it's quite good at treating. But what next? And one thing it's not really as good at is long-term behavior change. The idea of what's the thing I can keep doing over time. And I think that's where the Masters program comes in. You still have that medical supervision, you have physiotherapist supervision, you have experts on hand, but now we're guiding you through how to get the long-term benefits of exercise. So it's not just about getting you away from your injury or your illness, while it is about that, and that's really, really important. It's about what's next and how do we really begin to thrive and really develop and maybe get better than we ever were. And I know we use that phrase, to get fitter and not frailer. And I think that's a concept, like it's such a powerful sort of arc of someone's story to have an injury or an illness. And, okay, we've got to, maybe have our acute, we might be hospitalized, we might be very much in a medicalized sort of treatment. And then we maybe transition, we might even be in a rehabilitation, an in-hospital rehabilitation or a step-down facility. And, then maybe I see physio, but where do I go then? And I think, the Masters program can help with, a lot of those sort of touch points along the journey, but in particular, we can help with that long-term piece where, not only get you back to where you are, get you better than where you are, and really push on, and I think that's it's a really powerful journey for people to go on.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the big drivers for maybe people to join the Masters program in the first place. I say we almost have two types of people. Number one is like that they've had a big injury or they've had some sort of medical illness. They're kind of thinking to themselves, I'm not as fit and as strong and as healthy as I was 5 or 10 years ago. So they can see maybe their health is in a bit of a decline, and they're thinking, if I don't start this now, what do the next 5 years look like? It's a bit of a now or never. They need to get fitter and not frailer. And that can be a real motivator. Or maybe their kids or their friends are telling them they need to join. They've seen their health decline or their mobility decline. So that can be a big driver for people to join. And, often by getting started, they see a big bounce back in the right direction. The law of diminishing returns. If I'm in the gym 15 years, it's hard to get 10% stronger. If I'm only beginning, it's quite easy to get 10, 20, 30% stronger at the start. And maybe the other type of person that joins is actually someone who's doing really well. Someone who's like, you know what, for my age, I'm quite active, I'm quite fit, I'm doing my golf, or I'm going for my runs or my swimming, whatever I'm doing, and use it or lose it. I actually want to stay really good. I can see what's coming down the line. I've seen some of my neighbours or my friends lose their health. Maybe I'm looking after my own mum or dad and, they're struggling to get up and down the stairs, or I've seen them have a fall. I want to make sure my balance is good. So that can be a secondary big drive for people who are doing really, really well, and they want to stay doing really, really well for as long as they can. And, they basically come in and they say, Mike Risteard, what do I need to do now so that I'm still this fit and this active and this healthy in 5 or 10 years time?
Yeah, well, look, and that's, again, it's such an important thing, because I suppose we've those two concepts of lifespan there and health span. And lifespan is how long I live for, and health span is how many years I am healthy for without chronic disease or without losing my functional capacity. And what we know is in Ireland, we have, I think we have the stats on that. We can pull them up. But in Ireland, we there's a difference between lifespan and health span of about 10 years. So I always think that's such a powerful concept as well. Like, what are we playing for? Why is it we are so passionate about getting people to exercise and train in the gym? Because we know it's one of the best ways to improve that health span. It can improve your lifespan, but we really want to improve your health span in those years. And, if there's ever a motivator, it's, how much is 2 or 3 or whatever number of years you can gain there of healthy years. What is that worth to people? And like, I know certainly for me, it's a huge motivator. Why do I try and stay fit and try to, try to exercise? Well, you want to have that kind of health span for as long as you can, so you can do the things you want to do. And I think that's it. It's something that is always front of mind. And I think something that's really important for it becomes more important, as you age. You really want that time is worth so much to you.
Well, I would say, like, our grandparents need the gym far more than we do. Okay, the older you are, the more you need it, and the paradox is you're much less likely to do it. And myself and yourself were telling our patients for years that this is what they needed to do, and it's only now that we actually have the facility and we have the system to actually refer them in and help them and guide them along the way. And I remember going over to my own nana's house, and she'd say, "Oh, here comes the physiotherapist." I'd have her doing her old squats up and down in the garden, or I'd have her lifting up the bag of sugar up and over her head. And again, that was long before Rapid ever existed, the Masters program ever existed. So, this is something we were telling our own parents to do, our own friends, our own patients. And, the Masters program was a result of, I suppose, that passion and, what was naturally something that we did. And, if I even look back at my own Masters, at the time, again, it was COVID. We couldn't do an interventional study. We all had to go and do a literature review. And I did my literature review on the effects of detraining and the effects of deconditioning, focusing more on athletes. So it was a time where, you could have Olympic level athletes, professional rugby players, footballers with no access to the gym. And what I wanted to know was, how would they detrain? How would they lose their muscle? And how would they lose their bone? And how would they lose, all the cardiac adaptations they'd made to aerobic training? And some of the best detraining studies are actually in bed rest, and some of them are in like NASA studies, people going to space in altered gravity. And what we learn about bed rest, it stuck with me. It's shocking. Within 2 days of lying in bed, the amount of your quad you lose is insane. Within, if you have an ICU stay, if you're a week or 6 weeks in ICU, or you have pneumonia, or you've fractured your hip and you spend prolonged time sitting, you're not weight bearing against gravity, you start to lose bone, you start to lose muscle mass straight away. And people often don't bounce back for that. So, again, a huge driver of the Masters program, as much as it is the art of coaching and the community and stuff we've created, it's us actually knowing the science and knowing, I naturally lose muscle mass as I age. I naturally lose bone mineral density. I can have these huge disuse events that accelerates this detraining, this deconditioning. So how do I prevent it, A? And if it's too late to prevent it, how do I treat it and get myself back on the way up as opposed to continuing the way down?
Yeah, 100%. And it's just interesting there, Mike, you say, like, we have this natural arc, and like if you look at a big group of adults as they move through life, we'll see that we gradually lose muscle mass and muscle strength, and that makes it look like this lovely kind of smooth curve that kind of happens, and it's very measured and very controlled, and we sort of say, oh well, look, it's so gradual, like it's kind of almost like it's not happening at all. But what we know that actually, if we look at any one individual and their own individual arc, is that we'll often see that, as you pointed out there, those disuse events where I have that illness or I have that injury, that suddenly results in a big phase change where actually, I may be, as you said, hospitalized, maybe I'm bedridden for a period of time, or maybe I fracture my hip and, I can't weight bear, or whatever it might be. And as a result of that, I lose muscle mass and I lose muscle strength and I lose function at maybe an accelerated rate. And that's more what represents the reality of what happens. And we all know people who maybe have had an illness or have had injury, and we see a change in them, and we find it they might find it hard to bounce back. And I suppose the thing we're so passionate about is trying to highlight that if we actually the fitter and stronger we are before we ever run into those events, means we don't drop as low and we have the ability to bounce back quicker. I think there's a nice graph and slide we can bring up there too, that I know we've both alluded to in the past, where you have these disuse events, and then you have the difference of someone who doesn't engage in consistent exercise, tends to maintain at that lower level. So they've had this disuse event, they drop, and then maybe they drift a little bit more because I suppose they've lost muscle mass, they've lost strength, they can't do as much, and all of that comes along with that, the trauma that comes along with that. But if they're aerobically trained, they walk or they do their bike, or they're involved in some
Back to the golf,
whatever it might be, you see those people can bounce back. And the people who bounce back even more are those who also engage in strength training, which means they rebuild their muscle strength, they rebuild muscle mass, as well as training their cardiovascular system, which is their heart and their lungs. And we see that big bounce back ability in those people in comparison to those who don't do it.
And I suppose the classic thing that I hear from patients coming in for their first session is post-cardiac event. And what happened is whether they had a bypass or they had stents or they had a heart attack or they had some sort of cardiac event. This could be 2 years ago. And they say, geez, I'm doing great now. I'm fully cleared by my cardiologist. I did my cardiac rehab. I'm back doing my 5K walks. But I've really noticed, Mike, is I never got my legs back. Okay, and they're basically describing what we say there. They've gotten fit again. They're able to walk. They're able to cycle. They're aerobically fit, but they've never got back their strength. And the reality is, you won't get your strength back unless you strength train. We don't build muscle mass by walking, even if it is hiking up and down the mountain, even if it is a big long cycle. They're using our slow twitch muscle fibers. They're using our aerobic or oxidative system, and they're not challenging the strength and the muscle mass. And and one isn't better than the other. Again, we always educate people this. I don't want to be good at English and bad at maths, or vice versa. I say you want to be good at both. You don't want to be fit and not strong, or
What
strong
if you're bad
and
at
not
both?
fit. Yeah, if you're bad at both, you what are you waiting for? You need to get started. So, the important thing is that I'm training my fitness. I'm doing my walking, my running, cycling, swimming, tennis, yoga, golf, whatever you enjoy, 4, 5, 6, 7 days a week. The more, the better for most people. But I'm resistance training at least twice a week. I'm resistance training using major muscle groups, progressing it, finding the right starting point and progressing it over time.
Yeah, Mike, and look, tying that into the master's program, I suppose one of the key things there is what are people generally able to do by themselves without much help? Well, most of the time people can get involved in some aerobic exercise. I mean, leave the house, go for a walk, or, it's that bit more accessible. There's less technique involved in getting on a bike, or maybe going down to your swimming pool or whatever it might be, or playing golf. But where people tend to need that bit more help and support is around the resistance training piece. And there's coaching needed for that. There's knowing what to do and how to do it, how to progress it. What if I have an illness or an injury? What about my symptoms? How do I exercise while I have symptoms? What symptoms are safe? What aren't? How do I know when I should push it on? How do I know when I should pull it back? And I think that's really a really crucial, or the crux of a lot of what we do in the master program. It's the cornerstone, is helping people learn how to exercise, particularly regarding strength training. And while we do engage in cardiovascular training and we coach people through that too, I think the resistance training bit is often the bit that we our skill set is most well suited to as both physiotherapists and strength and conditioning coaches, which we are, that allows us to really help people find, where do I start? How do I progress? And to get the benefits you've described there, to get their legs back, or get their strength back. They may be fit, they may be doing lots of good things, but where does strength come from? It comes from doing strength training and resistance training.
Okay, brilliant. So, Risteard, there'll be people listening at home who are thinking, well, everything there sounds unbelievable. This sounds like it could be for me. Or maybe someone's listening here and they're thinking, my mum or my dad or, someone I know, could be really well suited to this. But why don't we chat a bit more about the nuts and bolts of, actually what is the Masters program? So that's the theory behind it. That's why we set it up. But if I want to join, what's the first thing that happens? If I want to come in here and I think this sounds great, I'll give it a go. And what does that first appointment or that first assessment look like?
And even before that, Mike, how do people actually sign up for a first appointment? Like, how does that work? Well, first of all, people don't need a referral. Okay, we do accept referrals. We get loads of referrals from medical practitioners, from other physios, from orthopedic surgeons, from GPs, etc. But you can ring up and book in. You can also just book in yourself online. I think that's important. So it's very easy to and accessible to make a start. And everything.
And do they sign up for 6 months, or what do they do when they sign up at the start?
Brilliant question. So the first thing is an introduction session. So you sign up for an introduction session, and what that session involves is a physiotherapy session that lasts an hour, where we go through a full assessment with you. And the assessment is absolutely crucial, because the assessment reduces the whole uncertainty about the whole thing. During the assessment, what we do is we first of all we get to know you. We learn about who you are. We learn about your story, your history, and I suppose the motivation you have to actually attend, and what your goals are. And then we go through your past medical history. We go through your previous injury history or surgical history, and we discuss all that. And then we will do a physical assessment. We look at how you move. We're trying to see where are the key areas we need to work on, and also for us to gauge what is the right starting point for you. And then we go through an actual program, which it will design your program. We'll go through that, which will coach you through it. And then crucially, what you do is you trial 2 classes then. So there's no kind of, need to kind of commit to some long-term thing, although we believe that that's actually the most effective thing for you to do, is to commit to resistance training over the long term. But the introduction session involves trialing 2 classes, as well as doing the introduction, and then deciding if you actually want to join.
Is it for me or not?
Yeah, is it for you or not? Because it's not for everyone. Resistance training isn't for everyone. Some people just don't like it, but most people think they're not going to like it when they arrive. A lot of people will have fear to say, I'm not a gym person. I was nervous coming here. And I think the biggest word I would use to describe how people feel before they arrive is probably fear. There's a fear of the unknown. There's a fear that, as I said, I'm not a gym person. That's maybe for other people, and all of that, all of those kind of beliefs that we might have that can act as barriers. But I think, and the reality is that the kind of results on this speak for themselves, which is the vast majority of people who do the introduction session are absolutely delighted and really looking forward to doing it. And we've countless, I think, testimonials from members who will say exactly that, where they will say, look, I was a really reluctant a person at the start, and once I realized the whole program and how it's designed and how it's really tailored to help people with starting off, and really to help people at all stages to find the entry level, and that really is what it's all about at the start, that once they experience that, they realize, oh, this is not what I thought. And I do think we are trying to redefine a little bit what it is to train and exercise for older adults. It doesn't, you're not trying to train and exercise the same way a 20-year-old athlete trains and exercise. It is different, and there is different concerns, and it's our job to manage that.
Yeah, and I think the key there as well with the 2 class trial, it's that, I actually get a sense of what is it like when I'm there, not just one-on-one, but I'm there as part of the group. I get to see the other members. I get to see how it actually runs day to day. And it's a hard thing to get across in a podcast like this. It's a hard thing to get across in a video. It's a hard thing for your neighbor to tell you, oh, it's great, you love it. It's something else to actually go up and do it and go, now I get it. Because it's not like any other class. I mean, it's me and you don't stand there and go, everyone do this and everyone do that and everyone do that. You can have multiple different sessions and multiple different programs going on at the same time. in that first initial appointment, we will cater your beginning program to whatever injuries or ailments or surgeries you've had. So, if you have huge concerns about your knee, this knee is giving you terrible trouble, you're struggling up and down the stairs, you say, well, Mike, I don't want to get up and down from the floor and I'm afraid of doing a squat. No problem. We won't do them. Let's focus on everything else we can do and not worry about those 2 or 3 you can't do. And I think, as you said, with that fear, it's only when someone comes in, gets started, does a class that they go, now I get it. Now I see why it's different. Now I see why it's worth doing that a session first, that assessment first. And, even in that first assessment, we can end up talking for 30, 40, 50 minutes to cover all bases. We want to know, does this person have any injuries, any problems at the moment? What do their previous injuries look like? Have they had any major muscle tears, broken bones, recurrent back pain? Do they have any MRIs or any other scans or x-rays that is worth us having a look at? Have they had any surgeries, be it to their joints or be it elsewhere? Anything medical, asthma, diabetes, epilepsies, cancers, viruses. We're obviously huge on learning about if they've ever had a DEXA scan or any risk factors for a fracture. Do they have osteoporosis or osteopenia? Is that something we need to be aware of? What medication are they on? And I think a real key thing as well that can often be bypassed is, what does their activity levels look like at the moment? Like, what is a normal week for them? Some people come in and they go, well, I'm only doing 2,000 steps a day. I'm not very active. Well, we need to pay attention to that, because anything we do in the gym might be a big jump for them. Other people come in and they're golfing 3 times a week. They're looking after grandkids. They're doing 15,000 steps a day. They're really, really active. Some people have been in, do they have gym experience? Again, is another question. Some of them have been in gyms in the past. It could be 20 years ago. Some of them were in gyms up till recently. And, for whatever reason, they want to give our service a go. And I think, again, what really sets us out, and something that we'll never leave that first point without asking, is what's the goal? Why is it that you want to join the Masters program? And that can be really interesting to hear, because some people will tell you it's to get stronger. Some people will say it's to lose a bit of weight, but other people will say, well, I want to be able to play golf in 5 years' time, or I want to be able to go on holidays with my grandkids and not be worried about getting up and down from the floor. Other people say, I want to be able to play my tennis. I want to be able to keep up with my friends or my family. And, the individual, like, if you have 300 people doing this, you have 300 individual people's goals and something to work towards, and how is it that resistance training can help them achieve that?
Yeah, spot on. And I think a way I certainly would frame it is that the Masters program is an entry point to healthcare. So people are not just being dropped into kind of a generic class, where it's a generic group, and everyone's doing the same thing. Like, that's not it at all. It's a supported pathway for people. There's a foundation program at the start, and then we can progress into our main program over time. And I think even just trying to get across, Mike, exactly like what the class is, like, I think a way to describe it is it's like a self-paced open gym, which has a number of different programs, which are kind of pathways for progression. So, what actually happens is, it's not one person standing at the top of the gym saying, all right, everybody do jumping jacks, or everybody do, this or that. We have people who have all spent an hour working with a physio to design the exact right entry level for them. And someone who's been here 1 week is doing a program appropriate for someone who's been here for 1 week, and they're doing it appropriate to them and their needs. Well, someone who's been here for 3 months is doing something that's appropriate for them who's been here for 3 months. And that's our job, to make sure that we have the right program for the right person at the right time, and that we then have a pathway that people can progress on. And it's our job to find out where people should start on that, and then, as time goes forward, how they should progress. And, it's trying to explain that in a simple way, because it is simple, but it's, as you mentioned, it is a little bit hard to get that across without actually being at a class.
Yeah, and I think what we're talking about here, I suppose, is our foundation program. So, somebody's coming in for their first assessment. As we said, we've asked them all these questions. We've got a thorough background. Depending what they tell us, we'll then do our physiotherapy screen, our physiotherapy assessment. Of course, if this person's biggest complaint is their right shoulder's been an issue for, the last 10 years, well, the first thing we're going to look at is their right shoulder. If their issue is their back, we're going to have a look at their back. If they have 3 or 4 issues, we'll look at all those. If they're generally doing quite well, we might just do a bit of a basic movement screen. So again, that assessment is driven by the individual's history, their medical conditions, their surgeries. Hearing their goals, taking their history, doing our assessment, we then use our skills as physios to say, well, this is their starting point. And their starting point, we call it the Foundations program. And we have this generic blueprint of a Foundations program, which is, if you're completely pain-free, you've no sort of problem areas and you move really well, this is what we'll start you on. But we can get rid of any of these exercises and add anything in. We can use our own clinical experience and, our own knowledge to guide that program. So, 50% of people may follow the sort of blueprint foundation program. Other people get something completely different. And the idea is our goal in that first session is get the right program for the individual. If they've just had a hip replacement, of course, we might give them a couple of hip exercises and remove anything that's a bit of a trickier one. Same with the shoulder. So with that foundations program, it's quite individual if it needs to be. We will email it to them so they can have it on their phone. They can print it out. We have a version of it up on the board in the gym. So when they come in there for their first class, they're going to have this foundation program and their individual foundation program ready.
100%. And I think it's the foundation program is such an important part of what we do. And we mentioned at the start that if the overriding emotion that a lot of people arrive in the door with is fear, well, during the foundation program is where you start to see fear reducing. People are starting to begin to feel confident. And we know we've got that right when we've picked the right exercises that people can do and they enjoy doing and they can do it well. And people don't need to arrive to the master program knowing how to train. Like, we are going to teach you how to train. That's really important. And we want to be starting that at just the right level for you. And I always say we want to be picking our winners there.
And the thing I always tell them is the only thing they need to remember is how to get here.
Yeah. Once you arrive, it'll happen. Yeah. But I think it's so important that we pick the exercises that are ones that, as I said, pick the winners. Let's back winners at the start. Let's not pick exercises that, are, up in the red zone in terms of difficulty for you, or where your body and maybe your history just means that you're not used to this movement. Let's pick the ones that are big winners for you and ones that you're confident in at the start.
I think though that's our huge thing. It's like we can always build. Like, you can start small. We can always make things harder. The gym is the easiest place in the world to make things harder, but it's impossible to make things easier. So if we do too much in their first session and they're sore, they're not going to come back to us. And this is often like what joining a gym was, and that's why people are afraid coming to us. It was like going to the Marines. They'd absolutely murder you the first session. You'd be bucketing sweat. You could barely walk up and down the stairs the next day, and you're meant to say, geez, the lads are great up there. That's not the case. If anything, people leave here the first day and they go, that was a bit easy, Mike. And I say, great. Let's monitor how your body feels tomorrow morning. If tomorrow morning you still think it's easy, we'll do a little bit more the next day. And with this foundations program, again, for those first 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, we want to build them bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. So if we overdo it an inch. We're not going to overdo it a mile and cause some flare up. And we've the rest of the year, I say, listen, we'll get you really strong by Christmas. We're not in a rush to do it by the end of this week. And often people are so motivated when they join and they do the first appointment. They're like, oh, geez, the lads, this is great. And they want to do more. Well, the reality is you to give your body a little bit of time to adjust. And, it's why people get stronger in here. There was another lady, and she's a brilliant member. She's here probably 3 years now. But I remember when she was here after 1 year and she said, Mike, it's my 1 year anniversary. I go, that's brilliant. How do you feel? And she goes, well, I can't really believe the change. Like, number one, she goes, I've no pain in work. I used to have a lot of pain, sort of leaning forward, bending forward in work. No more pain. She said, I can now keep up with my husband and the kids when we go for a big hike. I'm not slowing anyone down. I'm leading the charge. I didn't think it would matter, she said, but I actually look way better. She goes, the biggest surprise, the biggest thing that's blown me away is that I never leave here bucketing sweat. I'm never, dreading a session. I'm never sore the next day. And in essence there, why that member has gotten so much stronger is consistency. Consistency will always trump intensity. And again, with that foundation program, it lasts between 4 and 12 weeks. Why? Because if I do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, I'm going to get better at it. I can't get worse. Okay. This is the beginner's gains in the gym. Me and you were in the gym 10, 15, 20 years. Very hard for us to get 10% stronger. Very easy for a master's program member who's never resistance trained before, who maybe is doing no strength training or no something high exertion stuff outside of here. Once we start, they get better, and they often need a much lower dosage than they think. Okay, so with that foundations program, start small, be really consistent, make it a little bit harder over time, and the results speak for themselves. And, they're almost annoyed that they're like, well, I wish I could work harder and work for longer. And it's like, you're getting results by doing less. It's almost a shock to them. They're not expecting it. Sometimes I think we expect our gym sessions to be like television programs. They need to be an hour long. Whereas even for some of our maybe frailer members who join, 15, 20 minutes, do that for 6, 8, 10 weeks and you wouldn't believe the difference in them.
Yeah. And I think also like connecting the foundation program to the real world is so important. Like, what are the cornerstones of the foundation program? Well, it's teaching people to be able to, squat, which is sitting and standing, to hinge, which is bending over and picking something up, to be able to push, to be able to pull, to be able to carry things, to be able to breathe properly while we're exercising. And it's always, we know the foundation program works well when you start to see people's confidence just growing. And, while initially people are a little bit fearful of lifting, you see that initially they're not sure if they should lift, and many people have been told that they shouldn't lift. And then you see their relationship with exercise changing. And that's where you just can really see people gain confidence. And that's when I think we know we've got it right, is when people are beginning to, change the relationship with lifting, with exercising, and beginning to become confident in it.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think they can see other members, what they're lifting. I think the way we have the kettlebell set up in the gym in one big line, they can, oh yeah, in a few weeks, I'd love to be up there a little bit more. They start to set themselves targets. And I think that change, you're saying, talk about that change that they can get with exercise. Sometimes it happens really quickly. Sometimes just by starting to exercise, by doing my leg extensions for my legs, by doing some of my rows and some of my pull downs, by getting my brain to switch on these muscles again, by getting my heart to kind of pump blood to these areas, people start going, geez, am I standing a bit straighter? Am I carrying myself a bit better? They can often feel really good really quickly. And that can be within a week or two. We normally tell them, give it 6 to 12 weeks, but it's very common for us to have somebody there for 2 weeks and go, geez, lads, I actually can't believe it.
And I think that's one of the beauties of exercise as a modality to improve our bodies and improve our function, is that people who are starting at the lowest base have the most to gain. And I think, again, we've a nice visual of that, but like the curve is steep in the beginning, and that is just like you're going to gain way more than you're ever going to gain. You could be doing it for years and you'll gain small amounts. The Irish rugby team can only gain 1 or 2%. But if I haven't been doing much exercise, I can make a big improvement over that first 6 weeks. And I can make more improvement as time goes on, but the improvement
rate of change is quick at the start. And I'll often use the violin or the piano as an example there. And I've never held a violin. But if I started playing the violin twice a week for the next 12 weeks, there's no way I could be worse. I could only be better. And I mightn't be, ready for the National Concert Hall. Okay. But I'll be way better than Mike is today. And the same with the piano. And that's the big thing with members coming in here. If they stick at this twice a week for 12 weeks, they don't need to be stronger than you or me, but they'll be way stronger than they are when they started. And again, I think another unsung thing about the Masters program, or through the Foundations program, is exactly that. It's the foundations, and you can't spend long enough laying the foundations. And a lot of the time people are dying to get off. They're, oh, Mike, I've been here 2 weeks now. Can I move on? And I always use golf again as my example. If I was to start playing golf, I wouldn't focus on my flop shot out of the bunker as my first shot. And even if somebody won, if Rory McIlroy won at the weekend because he executed that shot perfectly, it doesn't mean it's a good starting point for me. So what I'd probably start at is my driving, my chipping, and my putting. And I'd probably focus on my driving, my chipping, and my putting for 5 years, and I do nothing else, because the foundations of golf are the most important thing, and I can't get too good at those basics. And with the gym, we take the same approach. We don't need these people jumping on and off boxes at the start. We don't need them kettlebell swinging, doing one arm snatches. Nothing wrong with any of those exercises, but it's probably not the right choice for hundreds of people in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. So let's set really simple, basic exercises, like what you said, correlated to everyday life. Can I push with my legs? Can I pick something up? Can I push, pull, carry? Can I work my core? Can I get my heart rate up a little bit? And let's do that and nothing but that over and over and over and over again. We're not selling something that's, we're the only gym in the world that has this machine or has this method. It's actually, we're the opposite. We're the most simple, basic, straightforward gym in the country. But we do those basics excellently.
Yeah, and I think we lean into the details of the basic things, doing the basic things excellently, and trying to actually, follow it on till we've achieved the result. And I think a lot of it is down to the ability to coach those movements, the ability to make sure that we can execute movements correctly, the ability to be able to progress and regress exercises appropriately, and guide people along with how it should feel. I think it's also, when people are that little bit further along and they've done the introduction and they've done the foundation program, we do progress into maybe more reactive based works, like reactive based training, should I say, the ability to be able to, if you slip or you trip, that you can react and catch yourself before you fall.
Fast twitch muscle fibers.
100%. And I think so. It's not to say that, well, the program is simple. It doesn't mean that we can't work on higher level qualities, and we do. But again, we keep that really simple so that we can execute it really well. And, I suppose it's really down to knowing what are the key things we're trying to change, what are the key things we're trying to develop, and how do we do that for, a group of people as they progress. We've touched on a lot of key areas there. We've touched on, why we started the master's program, the assessment, the foundation program, and I suppose we've talked a little bit about exercise and what type of exercise we do. So tell us more about kind of the philosophy behind the exercises we do.
Yeah, well, I think, our slogan, use it or lose it, kind of summarizes the master's program and maybe the philosophy behind it more than anything else ever will. So, if I use my muscles, I'll keep them. And if I don't use them, I'll lose them. If I keep walking up and down the stairs and I keep lifting weights and I keep carrying things, I'm going to get better and better at doing that. I think really important in sort of our philosophy as well is separating the two types of exercise. On one part of the equation, we have our aerobic exercise. That's what's good for my heart, good for my lungs. That's my walking, running, cycling, swimming, tennis, yoga. I know we spoke a little bit about it earlier, but what are the recommendations? When at a bare minimum, I should be doing 150 minutes a week there. For most people, the more the better. Okay, unless I'm doing 20,000 steps a day. For most people, I'll get more out of doing a little bit more aerobic activity, but the most to be gained by those who are least active and less to be gained by those who are really active. Okay, everyone knows that. Okay, there's no one out there normally who says, I think walking's terrible for me, or I think being fit and being active is a bad idea. Most people know that's good. But what a lot of people don't know about is the resistance training. So that's what's actually good for my muscle mass, my muscle strength, my bone mineral density. These are the things as I get older that we spoke about start to decline, okay? Especially after 50 years of age, especially after menopause for a female, I get quite a sharp reduction in muscle strength, muscle power, muscle mass, how much muscle I have, and bone mineral density, unless I train it. Okay, so use it or lose it. If I train for strength and if I train for muscle mass and for bone mineral density, and I give myself the proper recovery and nutrition, all the other little side things that I need as well, well, there's a good chance I'll keep it. Okay, that's a huge part of our philosophy. Separate these two things. Most people know they should be active. Not everyone knows they should strength train. We're getting better at it. Okay, there is probably a generational shift here. We are hearing about it more and more on the radio. We're seeing it on the newspaper. We're seeing it on television. Every time there's an article written, we get a couple of new phone calls saying, "Oh, I'm after hearing about the benefits of this resistance training thing. Can you tell me a little bit more about the master's program?" Which is great. We'd love if the whole country knew this. And I think there's more and more probably younger people starting to tell their own parents and their own grandparents the benefits of staying strong and staying active.
Some of the most beneficial outcomes we love to hear people tell us about in the master's program is, that they felt, that engaging in resistance training and cardiovascular exercise has helped them to, they can feel more confident doing the things they want to do, minding their grandchildren, playing golf, going for a hike, returning to the activities that they enjoy and being able to do more of them for longer. And we absolutely love to hear that. But let's put our kind of more scientific hats on for a moment and talk a little bit about what actually changes in our bodies. What are the more objective changes or the more physiological changes? And I think we can nearly break that up into a couple of different areas. We've got our physical changes, our physiological changes, we've the psychological changes that come, and even, the kind of the social aspects. And then I think another key area will be maybe discussing even like the access to healthcare that people get in the master's program.
Yeah, brilliant. I think if we almost think of our body and all the different systems in our body, exercise and resistance training can almost have a positive effect on pretty much every system. So from, the straightforward one is the muscle. When I start to gain a little bit more muscle, that's my muscle mass. But even the muscle that I have, without even gaining more muscle, the muscle I have will get stronger. Suddenly picking up something in the garden is easier than it once was. Again, I remember last week telling me they were on holidays and they were coming back and she had her suitcase in one hand and her husband's in the other hand, and she walked the length of Terminal 1, I think it was, in Dublin, holding the two suitcases, not a bother to her. So, she said, now I know why Mike has us doing the farmer's carry in here. So I will get stronger. I'll be able to produce more force, and anything I have to do outside of the gym will be relatively easier than it was before I was stronger. To my bone, although it can be a slower rate of response, I can start to gain more bone, to build more bone, have denser bones. That can be a positive response to my bone mineral density, which again is a huge reason why members join in the first place. We've had dozens and dozens and dozens of members give us their DEXA, pre-joining and a year or two after joining whenever they repeated it, and see an increase, ranging from, I think, 5 up to maybe 13, 14% of an improvement in bone mineral density, which is unbelievable.
My understanding from conversations that I've had with clinicians, in the past, and this would probably be going back 5 or 10 years, was that, maybe the best we could hope for was that we could maybe, maintain our bone mineral density. And, if we have low bone mineral density, that, it's quite hard to actually improve it. So it's interesting that and I know there's some kind of more emerging research around this as well from a couple of different groups. And I think, well, there was a Lift More study, I think, by Belinda Beck and those kind of things that have really kind of, changed the narrative around this a little bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, it can still be maybe somewhat of an emerging science. We for a long, long time, people thought exactly as you said there, that the bone I have now is, the bone I'm trying to keep, that I'm always falling from this point. And if I exercise and I take my medication and I eat well, hopefully I'll maintain what I have, but I can't get more. Once I've started to lose it, I'm trying to flatten that curve as opposed to continue to lose it, but I can't get it back up. And, we've seen that's not the case with recent studies. So Belinda Beck has kind of been a pioneer over in Australia, and they've got the Onario Clinic. They've done a huge amount of research out there. There's dozens and dozens and dozens of papers printed there, research done. They have, people with quite low DEXA scores, deadlifting heavy. They have them jumping, hopping. They're doing kind of vibration machines and stuff as well. So number one, they've proved that they're safe, because this was a huge fear. It was, I've got osteoporosis. I better not bend over. I better not pick anything up. I better be careful. So number one, they've shown it's safe. And more importantly than that, they've shown that DEXA scans can move in the right direction. We can almost spend a whole podcast on this area alone. And, it's a huge interest of mine. It's a huge reason why people come in and book into the clinic and join the Masters program. But to give you maybe a higher level overview, if I was to say there's 3 main pillars, and hopefully we can flash these up as well. But number one is I have to do my weight bearing exercise. If I don't load my bone, I won't gain bone. We can look at Wolff's Law there of how does bone, how do we remodel it? How do we get more bone versus lose bone versus stay where I am? Of course, it has to be a safe amount. But if I go to the moon and I'm living in a space station, no matter how much medication I take, no matter how much exercise I do, I'm going to lose bone. Number 2 is my diet, my supplements. I need the building blocks to gain more bone. So it's great if I'm doing all the deadlifts and the stomping and the jumping and loads of exercise. But if I don't have enough calories, enough protein, vitamin D, vitamin K, calcium, if my body isn't able to absorb all these nutrients, I don't have the building blocks to gain more bone. If in doubt, you speak to your dietitian there. This isn't our area of expertise. And then finally is medical management. Again, between my consultant and my GP, do I need to take any medication again to promote bone gain? If I can tick these 3 boxes for a year or two, my DEXA should move in the right direction. But, I think we might even talk more about in more depth about that in the future. But some of the other changes people might see, people start to say, geez, I'm feeling a bit straighter. People are maybe they're hunched forward or they're bent over, and this is how they're driving the car and watching telly and on the computer. And suddenly we have them doing exercises, promoting more extension. They feel more upright. Pain can massively reduce. Again, we're physios first. People come into us because they have really bad back pain or hip pain or knee pain, or they've had a surgery and they're rehabbing. So they're saying, wow, I feel way better. Their function improves. They're doing way more. They're way more active. They're moving quicker. They're, if we look at an average week, they're doing way more steps. They're playing their golf again. Their
bigger engine. Yeah, they can do more, right? Yeah, 100%.
Big time. From a cardiovascular point of view, people are saying, you know what? I'm getting a bit dizzy now. They go in to chat to their GP. Their blood pressure has gone down. They need to come off their blood pressure meds. They're actually making a positive change to exercise. They're losing weight. Their heart rate's reducing. Their blood pressure's reducing. That kind of ties in with what you said. Their capacity's increasing. We've had a couple of members say that, and we almost have to warn people now who join, who are on blood pressure medication, that if you start to see a change here, you might need to go back and chat to the doctor. Their balance is getting better. Their confidence is there. They go, you know what, I'm able to do more. I'm not afraid of picking up something at home anymore. I'm not afraid of going up and down that flight of stairs if the lift is broken. I think you might touch more on some of the social and the psychological benefits, but I think a huge thing that people see when they join here, and again, it's maybe not something we speak enough about, is they suddenly have a bit of hope. Okay, that they're thinking, you know what, this getting older thing isn't great. My knee is at me, my back is at me, I'm getting weaker, I'm getting frailer. I don't like this. And then suddenly they come in here and, we tell them, well, you know what, a lot of this stuff we can improve. They've been in a couple of weeks and they go, geez, I feel great. And I'm looking at that person over there who's 10 years older than me. I want to be like that in 10 years. I thought in 10 years time, I was going to be, barely able to move. And now they look at, again, some of our older members in their 80s are absolutely incredible. I don't know why they're not getting, on the 6-1 news every week to show them what aging can look like. But I think people have a huge hope and a renewed sense of, if I look after myself and if I follow the plan, if I exercise and eat well and look after myself, the next 5-10 years can look better and not worse, which, it's invaluable.
Yeah. No, 100%, Mike. I think, it's all really, really powerful and spot on. And it's really important to highlight those different changes that we can see. It's not just about doing an exercise program. It's about making changes to all of these different areas. And, I think it's not just, how you look and how you feel, but there's those physiological changes, those changes in things like, really important health markers for us. There's blood pressure, even things like for people with diabetes or on the verge of diabetes, that we can see improvements in insulin sensitivity, and we know how good our muscles are at storing a glucose and ensuring that our insulin system is working appropriately, and actually engaging in regular activity is so important for that too. And we've had a number of people who are diabetic, and how important exercise is for them to manage that. And of course we've body composition as well, actually changing our body composition. We see, it's not all about weight. I think we can sometimes be sort of a little bit too hung up on what a number might be on the scales, but that number is only as meaningful as the competition or the composition that underpins it. So how much muscle mass do I have? What's my body fat percentage? And okay, bone mineral density can come in under that a little bit as well. And we see changes in that in all of those areas for the better. And yeah, you touched, Mike, on I suppose the some of the more social and psychological factors. And I think like a huge part of it is just making friends in an environment that is supportive. Where is it that you go when you're older to, become better than you were last week, to do it to be fitter than you were last year, and like the feel good factor that comes with that. And the fact that you have, a support group of other people, like-minded people doing a similar thing to you, or a similar thing as you, I think is really, really powerful. And look, we know that these things are not just, airy-fairy. Like there's, again, hard evidence to support the importance of belonging, purpose, friendship, having a social circle that can support you. It's absolutely massive, and it's really the gel that makes everything work for us as humans.
It's the unsung hero in the Masters program is the buzzword community, but what does that mean? It means it's a bit of crack. Like people have a bit of fun. They generally enjoy coming up here. They have a bit of a laugh. They're sitting in between two others and they're chatting about the weekend or about the football or about, geez, Mike's giving out to us all today, watch out. They actually have a bit of fun. They get on well. You can see people go over and have their coffee afterwards. There's a social side to it. They join the Masters program to get fitter and stronger. But part of the reason they stay is they're actually enjoying it. It's not a sterile environment. People don't want to come in here and we're all in white lab coats and it's lift that, do this, and we're like robots. They actually really, really enjoy it. That's invaluable in itself, and it's a credit to everyone I think who works here and all the coaches, and it's generally somewhere where people enjoy going. I often say it'd be a great place to come if I didn't have to work.
100%. Yeah, no, spot on. And look, another area which I think is unsung is the idea that if you're in the master's program, you have access to healthcare. What does that mean? Well, you have a physiotherapist at every class. So that means you can have a touch point with a physiotherapist 3 times per week. And you've early access to physiotherapy. We can catch issues before they become a big problem. Like how many people do we see in the clinic who, tells us that their Achilles has been sore for 6 months before they actually come in and we get a look at it. And how much are we saying in our head, geez, I wish we could have dealt with this 5 months ago, and how much easier it is to get on top of problems when we have access to healthcare and when we can ask that question early. And I suppose there's more to that, which is, actually the ability to maybe refer people onwards, organize an MRI scan for them, refer them to their GP or to an orthopedic consultant, and to be able to do that early before, it's become a big issue that's affected quality of life. I think that's massively important. And of course, then there's all the bits around modifying exercises, coaching people, and, showing people exactly how to do things the right way, how to regress them, how to progress them. I think that side of things is is something that I think we all believe that is what people need really to manage their health best, is regular. It's preventative, it's regular and it's preventative rather than just dealing with things when they've already happened.
Yeah, well, and I think the members hugely appreciate that. And it's a big driver why some people drive for 20, 30, 40 minutes to get here. And it's because they want a chartered physiotherapist at every session, that they trust us. They know we've gone through their full medical history. We understand about their knee. We know about their back surgery. We're not going to do something unsafe for them. And, if we threw them in the deep end into the Marines, like we talked about earlier, we might flare them or make them worse, or they might have to go back and see their GP. So they trust us as physiotherapists. It's absolutely invaluable that if we tell them something safe, that they're able to do something, that it's not going to cause any damage, that they believe us. And in that environment, they're happy to follow the plan. And as you said there, it's that we can give them on the spot feedback of that's too heavy, that's too light, change this, change that. They say, my knee's a bit sore. Well, look at your technique. Let's fix it here. How many times in our own practice have we sent someone home with an exercise or with a program as physios to do for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and they come back to you and they weren't doing it right. So they had the wrong technique for 6 weeks. And, had we seen them on the first day, we could have fixed it, or vice versa. They do something, it's a bit sore, and then they did nothing. So then they missed out on 5 weeks of training because their knee got sore, and we're able to actually fix that with one simple cue, with a technique thing or with a weight thing. So, having the ability to do that on the spot is worth so much to people. And again, they hugely value it.
100%. And I think, look, it's important to emphasize, I think, how much having a physiotherapist-led, program is really important. And like, we've huge time for our strength and conditioning colleagues, and they're brilliant at what we do, and we're strength and conditioning coaches ourselves. But being able to manage the medical side of things, and having had that experience, and we've spent times on hospital wards. We work with people getting them out of bed after surgeries or after illnesses, and that's our role. So it gives us that extra little bit of experience and that extra medical literacy that I think really helps people to have confidence in exercising in the presence of injury, in the presence of other healthcare issues, and knowing also that we can very much liaise with a wider multidisciplinary team of a GP, a dietitian, an orthopedic consultant, or a cardiologist if we need to, and we're very happy to do that. And so I think that's a really important aspect of the master's program, is that it's physiotherapist led.
Yeah, and it also means like people don't have to sort of reach a minimum standard to join here. Like sometimes people think, geez, I better get fit now before I join the gym.
Yeah.
And that's probably not the case. So, I always say we have a low floor and a high ceiling in the master's program. What I mean by that is we can get people in who are quite medical. Obviously they need to be stable. They can't have an active infection, but we can have people in who are quite frail, people in who don't have a huge amount of sort of weekly activity levels at the moment, who are coming in here and they only need a sprinkle of exercise. So they're quite low on the scale.
Yeah.
We can have other people who are really strong and really fit and really active. And in this one environment, we can cater for everyone on that spectrum and give them the proper workout. Because the person who is the strongest doesn't need to drop down to the level of the person who's the weakest, and vice versa. The weakest person doesn't have to keep up. So, that's a really unsung part. It's something that maybe a lot of facilities can cater for. And again, even with this idea of, say, the people who are more frail, older, have a lower starting point on the foundations program when they join, they can obviously progress indefinitely in here either. It's not as if people reach a ceiling where we only have 5 kilo weights and there's nothing beyond that they can do, or, we don't have any machines. Me and you, or, the professional team could train in this gym. There's a really, really high ceiling. And, again, that's not something that every facility has, or every type of class like this can do. I think another thing, Risteard, that's so important to mention is, we've hundreds of members doing this, right? And the vast majority over the year or 2 years or 3 years they've been here are getting fitter and not frailer. Okay. That's not normal. And I think if you join the master's program and you enter this group and you're surrounded by 200 other people who are getting fitter, you start thinking, jeepers, this is the done thing. Everyone between 60 and 65 feels better, and everyone between 75 and 80 feels better. And I think if you go population wide, most people every 5 years probably feel a little bit worse, or most people, they don't feel healthier. They don't feel like they've more energy. They don't feel like they can do more. They don't feel like they can lift more. But in this group, it's the complete norm. And I often have to remind people, do you realize how much better you are than when you joined? And they're going, well, Mike, my deadlift hasn't gone up in the last 3 weeks. And I'm going, well, look how far it's up in the last 3 years. You know, you were getting hugely better. Now that rate of change might slow down a bit, or even at worst. Again, there's a member in her 80s who came to me once, Mike, you know, I'm very concerned here. I seem to have plateaued. And I said, between 77 and 80, you put on a huge amount of strength. And now between 80 and 82, you're leveling off a bit. Everyone else from 77 to 82 went shooting downhill. You're still so far ahead of that curve. And even if everyone's going down at this rate and you dip at a tiny rate in another 2 years, you're still way ahead of everyone. And she goes, jeepers, thanks so much for explaining to me that way. Okay, they're getting fitter, not frailer. This is at, you know, group wide. This is Masters program wide. And this is not population wide in Ireland or anywhere in the world.
Yeah. Well, look, I think it's such a good point. And even like if you're maintaining, you're winning there, you know, because as you said, like what's naturally happening is we're gradually losing muscle mass and muscle strength, and it's accelerating as we get that little bit older. So, you know, absolutely, like if you've brought yourself up to a high level, there's always going to be that natural peak, you know, and that natural plateau. We feel it ourselves, you know. There's certain levels that are just very hard to get beyond with training, and they take sacrifices. So, you know, you want to make big sacrifices if you want to make the next leg up there. Of course, we see that in sport, and we see that with athletes. So, as well as we see the people in the real world. So it's important to say that it's not always about, you know, striving for more and more, and more is always better. It's often looking at zooming out, looking at the big picture. Where was I? Where am I now? And, you know, what's naturally happening? What am I combating against? And that's the slow march of time is what I'm combating against, really, isn't it?
Yeah, you're spot on there, Richard. Okay, so I think we've given loads of background there about, you know, what is the Master Program? Why did we start it? You know, if I'm going to come and join here, you know, what does my first assessment look like? What's this whole idea of the Foundations Program? What's the philosophy behind what we do here and some of the science behind the different systems in my body and how they improve with exercise? Why is it the community so important? And is that something I can look forward to? Is there anything else maybe beyond the gym, beyond just being here in person or beyond just doing our classes? Like what else is encompassed with this Masters Program idea, or maybe a little bit more about what we're trying to create here?
You know, there's quite a bit, I suppose, outside of the class. The classes is what we call the cornerstone of the Masters Program, where people attend and train under our supervision. But beyond that, there's a huge education piece, and we run a number of different programs around education. I suppose we do a number of different talks where we'll often get experts to come in and do Zoom talks. We've had occupational therapists, dietitians, GPs. We've had pelvic health and women's health physios coming in. And this is to try and help our members to become educated in areas that are really, really important for their health, and in really, really important ways that support what they do in the gym and with exercise in general. And of course, we run our Masters Day, and we're really looking forward to our third Masters Day, which is coming up in October this year. And the Masters Day is I think we had about 100 people at the first one and about 220 at the second one, and we're hoping for a bigger and better one this year. And just shows the amount of interest that there is in an event like that. And we've had orthopedic surgeons, again, dietitians. We've had, you know, we Anna Geary there last year, and it's a really empowering event that where we educate people on the importance of exercise and strength training, and we get experts in who can share their knowledge in their respective areas. And you know, what's so empowering about days like that, I think, is that, you know, a lot of the messages that different practitioners are sending are often the same, or circling around the same areas, which is exercise is so important. Let's do everything we can to make sure that we're getting all the benefits we can from exercise. But outside of that, we have, I suppose, a number of different social events that we run. There's coffee mornings where the Masters Program members will come down. We'll do bake-offs and coffee mornings. And these are, you know, I think it's a huge part of it, again, is this idea of look, we say exercise is medicine, but community is medicine too. And we know how important it is. And we've touched on it a little bit earlier, how important for our health community is, and social connection and belonging and all of those things. And we really foster that. It's really, really important to us. It's really, really, really important to our members that community is absolutely at the center of what we do. And because that's what makes us tick as humans, and it's what makes the whole thing enjoyable. It's the glue that holds everything together. And we want to be a support for one another. And it's a thing we're really proud of, I suppose, that aspect. There's also a number of fitness retreats that we I think the second one is happening this year now. A group are going out to do a fitness retreat in Marbella, and it's the feedback that the members gave for last year's one was incredible. They all really enjoyed it, and again, that's something that you won't hear that many 55 to 85-year-old adults doing, is going away with a group of their peers to exercise and to live the good life, and again to enjoy themselves. And I think that's that's a huge part of what we do.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back to the bake-offs. I always try and be quite political with the bake-offs, and I always say I need to sample everything. It's unfair if one of the members has maybe brought up a cake and, I don't at least try some of it. But the bigger the masters program get, it's a bigger task for me to try everything. But, I'm more than willing, but it's one of those mornings where I have to skip a breakfast and do a bit of a workout to justify all the cake.
We won't let the dietitians know about that.
Don't let them know. But I think the standard of baking is mind the standard of strength game, but the standard of baking is definitely getting better the longer the masters program goes on.
Tom Wolfe's brown bread is still my favourite,
and the marmalade. But all those little things, like, they all add up, and the members love them. And sometimes we have to remind ourselves to organise them, don't we? Because anytime we have a coffee morning, it's just a feel good event. And I think it's important for the members as well to spend a bit of time with each other outside of the class environment. They can have a bit of a chat. They're not in a rush to get out for the next class to come in, or they're not going off to do whatever they do with their day. So it is a really enjoyable morning. And oftentimes members, because there's so many classes now, they might see each other. So, back in the day, 4 years ago, they might cross paths the whole time. And now we've 55 classes, so they could go 2 months without actually crossing paths. And at the coffee morning, they get to have a bit of a catch up.
Yeah. And Mike, we must not forget to mention our Masters Games, which we had the first ever Masters Games earlier this year. And geez, what a brilliant event that was. I don't know if we've had a chance really to talk about it all that much since it. And, what was that? That was a day where we had 12 teams of 4 competing together. We were raising some money for a charity, and we were also really trying to raise awareness about the importance of trying to meet our exercise recommendations. So only 33% of adults, older adults in Ireland, were reaching their exercise recommendations. So we used that as our motivator. We said we'd try and do we'd lift 33,000 kilos, and that we'd cycle 33 kilometers, and we'd row 3,300 meters, and we used that as really our kind of North Star for the day, to that our group that day, we're going to be part of that 33% of older adults that actually hit that. And I think it was the place was electric there, and it really spurred us into thinking about how there needs to be more of these kind of events and more of these kind of days for older adults. And I think it was so enjoyable, and the energy that was there. We were a little bit maybe wondering, will this, we've all seen what happens at High Rocks, and we've seen the videos and we've seen the pictures, and and so, is there that same hunger and thirst for that in this group? And I think that day certainly showed there absolutely is.
Yeah, and it kind of started because so Rocky would often run maybe a games day for the Rocky Fitness members. And, after this has been going on for a while, the Masters program started saying, well, where's our games day? Can we hop in on that one? Or, well, why aren't you doing one for us? And I think it was the same thing with the retreat. They're not a shy bunch. So if they feel like, there's a little bit there they're not getting a taste of. So they actually asked for it. And we said, you know what? That's a great idea. There, as you said, there isn't one. There's High Rocks and there's Trican, there's all these other events. But is there something, the Battle for Cancer, is there something aimed at this age group, 55 plus? Obviously catered to their level and their ability, but something that they can actually push themselves as part of a team. And I think it was 16 teams, it was 64 people we had, so 16 teams of 4, which was incredible. And there was more people who couldn't book in because we didn't have the space for them. And
told you I wasn't good at maths.
And there was even more people that were away or just didn't suit them. And a lot of people were on the fence. They said, you know what, I'm not going to do the first one, but you tell me how it goes and I might do the next one. And as you said, like the overriding feeling that day was like, wow, this was a buzz. The place was electric. The music was pumping. The members absolutely loved it. They all bought in. They all worked together. No one was saying, what did you deadlift? No one was saying, how far did you row? It wasn't about the competition. It was about everyone pushing themselves together. And like the sooner we can get the next one, I know it's in the pipeline. We tried to get one for the summer, but with people away and all this kind of stuff, it just didn't suit. So hopefully post summer we'll get the next one in. But yeah, it was such a good feel good day. The members really, really appreciated it. I'll bring it back to the plank. Like we were doing the minutes of the day. We were trying to outline how's the day going to go? How do we change the equipment and get everything to run to a T? And we'd a max plank challenge, and we'll put up the picture there maybe. But we'd see how long can members hold their plank. And in my head, I said, somebody will last 3 minutes maybe, but we'll give them a 3-minute window to get this done. We had to call it after 5. At 5 minutes, there was still 4 or 5 of them still going, and everyone else screaming at them. And I said, we'd still be there if I, they were too stubborn.
There's no way I could hold a 5-minute plank. So
absolutely not.
Yeah.
And me neither. Yeah, I think a 2-minute would be a big ass. So, to see people in that age group pushing themselves like that, being able to, some of the feet, some of the deadlifts, some of them pushing themselves in the aerobic stuff. So really, really good feel good day. Between our educational day, the Masters Day, and now our Masters Games, just really good things to look forward to. And they can take a bit of work on our part to maybe organise and get right, and make sure we have enough staff here and car park, and people have tickets and sign-ins and all that kind of stuff. But when you get to the end of a day like that, it's all worth it. These almost kind of sit under this idea, this overriding idea of maybe our Masters movement. And what do we want? Like, we want people in Ireland to be fitter, not frailer. Okay, we want people to be fitter, more active, healthier, stronger as they get older. And there's no reason they can't be, as we spoke about, especially if they're coming from a lower baseline. I often say to people, we probably won't get you back to when you were 20, but we can probably get you better than you are today. And, for most people, that's what they're looking for. They're not expecting to get back to when they were at their peak. What they want is improvement from today. And, this sort of overriding idea of our Masters movement, we have our Masters program, that's our in-person service. We've our Masters Day or our Masters Education wing. We've maybe the Masters Games, which could be something, maybe that's once or twice a year. I think with the Games, as we spoke about, we'd love to have maybe people from around Ireland come up and compete at that. And if there is people listening from who maybe aren't based in Dublin or a member of our gym, they can be based in Dublin if they want. Maybe reach out to us if that's something you'd be interested in, because I'd love to get somewhere communal where we can have people from all over the country compete. And, maybe if you're a gym owner elsewhere and you've a team of 4 or 8 or how many teams you want in this age group you think would be interested in it, it'd be great to see how that goes. As you said, we've our Masters retreat. This is our chance to go away, to have a fitness holiday, to have maybe a holiday that doesn't revolve around maybe alcohol or isn't about just sort of laying on the sunbed. It's actually active. It's with a group of people. And again, the community side, maybe you don't have someone to go on holidays with, maybe you do, but to have a new group you can go away with and, get to know a few new people, I think that's invaluable for a huge amount of members. But these almost all sit under our umbrella of this Masters movement.
Yeah, and Mike, I think there's even one more area. Like, I think we have this umbrella, and I really like it. And there's those 4 kind of key, kind of almost tangible things that we have. As you said, there our Masters movement is the umbrella term. We have the Masters program. We have the Masters Day. We have the Masters Games. We have the Masters retreat. But then there's also the Masters mindset. And the mindset of a Masters program member is to be fitter and not frailer as I age. And it's changing the narrative around what it means to be, an older adult in Ireland. And it's, as you said, it's to be more active. It's to use exercise to get all of the benefits that comes along with that. So I can do more of what I want to do, so that I can have a longer health span, that I can play with my grandkids. I can play golf. I can be active. I can do the things I want to do for longer. And I really like that idea of the Masters mindset and the Masters movement. I think we're big proponents of it. It's something that really energizes us and gets us passionate. And I think our members are even more so. So it's hopefully something that we can see now become a bigger and growing wave as it is now in Ireland over the coming months and years.
And isn't there's huge evidence behind this mindset idea as well. And I know we've both read Dr. Roseanne Kenny's book, Age Proof. And, I think the first 2 or 3 chapters focus hugely on the mindset piece and the positive aging piece. And is it the nun study that they followed the group of nuns over time, and those who had a positive view on aging when they were younger aged way better over time than those had maybe a negative view. And I think this is repeated around. It's to have a sense of purpose, to have a sense of community, to have a close-knit friendship group, to have all these little extra things can completely change my mindset, my view of getting older, my view of aging. And those of us who have the most positive mindset often have the most positive results.
Yeah, 100%, Mike. And I think, there's so much that ties in around the mindset piece. I think it ties so much in with the sort of the community aspects as well, and having support there, look, having a positive outlook, and trying to be proactive, and trying to engage in activities that are good for us, both physically but also socially, and also psychologically, is so important. And I think developing the master's mindset is certainly something that we can see coming through in a lot of our members who like they tell us themselves that they're feeling happier, they're
like new people.
They're
like new people. And I often talk about the catalyst, right? So sometimes joining the master's program is a catalyst for 10 other things. And it's like, okay, I've met the lads, I've done my first intro, I've done my 2 class, I'm going to sign up. And because I sign up and I'm going to the gym, it's like, well, I'm actually going to go to bed a little bit earlier and get up a bit earlier so I'm ready. And because I'm getting up earlier and I'm going to the gym and I'm going to eat a bit better and drink a bit more water, and because I'm doing all of that, well, I better get my walks in outside of here. And then I better go over and have a coffee and actually get to know the other members. And then suddenly they're coming to the education days, and then suddenly they're going to the retreat, and that one baby step, it's the butterfly effect, that one little step of coming in here and meeting us the first day. And 6 months later, they're actually, after doing 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things that are really positive for their health, really positive for their mood, really positive for their energy levels. And they'll turn around and they go, geez, the gym's great. And as great as it is, it was actually only one thing of this whole sort of knock-on effect, this catalyst effect of all the positive things they've done for themselves. It's often their kids make the first step for them, or their husband or their wife. People sign up a loved one with our gift voucher. They sign them up. So you're able to do that. You can buy a gift voucher. You can sign mum or dad up, or your brother, your sister, whoever it is. Here's the intro, go up, meet the lads, do 2 classes. If you don't like it, you don't like it, but here's a bit of a nudge in the right direction. And every Christmas we probably get about 20, 30 people doing this, and most of them are still here at the next Christmas.
But look, it's a great gift. Sometimes we need that little bit of a nudge, we need that little bit of a push from the people around us, it's a great way, I suppose, to maybe push us to do something that we maybe don't really want to do, but deep down know we should do. And we're probably avoiding a little bit in ourselves, and often we all could do with that little bit of a push.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. And maybe that'd be a great way to end it, Risteard, is that if there is anyone at home who needs that little bit of a push in the right direction, make that first step, try it out. If it's not for you, it's not for you. But I think it'd be a great thing to give a go, and you have to start.
Yep. And remember, it's never too late. But don't wait. Now's the time to do it. The best time to do it was last year. The second best time is now. Okay, 100%, Mike. So I think that's it. That's the message we want to push out to people. We want people to know that engaging in exercises, there is a place that can help you with that. There is a place that can help you with the start. It is possible for you. It's not for other people. You're not a gym person, and this isn't a normal gym anyway. So there is help out there for people who are looking for it.
Yeah, I always tell people in the first class, ask the other members, ask them what change they've seen.
Yeah.
It's all well and good me and you telling everyone you're going to feel great, but go in there, busy class,
100%.
Ask 15 others, what do they think?
Don't listen to us, listen to our members, see what they say. 100% on it, 100%. And that's the thing, like there's some testimonials up there on the websites and things like that, and reviews and all that, but come down, do the intro and speak to some members.
Use it or lose it.
That's it.